Welcome to Let's Talk Business. I'm your host, James Price. This podcast has been designed to address business pain points, often neglected, but if dealt with correctly, can really enhance business value and performance. I've had over 30 years experience in business, and I currently own JPO Business Proprietary Limited, a business valuation, advisory and transaction firm. We help private business clients across Australia and internationally grow, change and enhance the value of their businesses. Welcome to episode 3 of Let's Talk Business. I'm your host, James Price from JPO Business. And we have with us today Mahir Mahmand, who's Chief Operating Officer of the Islamic Bank Australia. He's got a fascinating history and story to tell. He's a serial entrepreneur. He started a number of businesses and a very colourful background. And it's great to have you with us, Mahir.
Thank you very much for having me, James.
It's a pleasure. And I say at the outset, I must thank the reason we're together, and that's Taran Patel, who's an important business analyst in my team, who's also worked for you. So it's great to be introduced by Taran, and look forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, same here. I loved working with Tarun. He was one of those people who came to us from Western Sydney University when he graduated.
Yeah.
And we had a program at the time to take people from Western Sydney University as graduates. And then the idea was to recruit them in our business. And he was one of those people. I always liked working with him.
Yeah, no, it's good. He's a very important member of our team. So anyhow, let me talk to you about starting up businesses, because you seem to have developed a bit of experience in that game, right?
Yes.
So how many businesses have you started, and are they still operating? What's happening? I'm interested to understand that space.
Yes, I have in total started 4 businesses throughout my professional career. They all exist today. They are much bigger than what I left them to be.
Yeah.
Of course, I took them from the point of inception to a point of success, and then I moved on and started the next one. Most of them were either organizations that I founded myself, or I was the founding CEO of. And in the startup world, you don't get very lucky to have 4 businesses and then 4 of them successful, because the number of businesses that fail is really, really high when you start them freshly. So I've been very, very lucky that every time I rolled the dice, it turned out to be quite successful.
So what's the secret, right? Let's go back to the first one that you started up. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about what was that business servicing, what market was it looking at, and what did you see that made you say, well, I think there's a business in this. I think I can make something that's meaningful here.
Yes. So of those 4 businesses, the first one that I started was overseas, but all the 3 remaining ones were the ones that I established in Australia. So the first one overseas was a banking business.
Yeah.
So I started a organization that then went on and established community banks. So as part of this APEX organization, we established 41 community banks across Afghanistan. And the idea there was that we saw there was a lot of need for community banks. This was in a time when the US was present in Afghanistan, that we had come out of an era of Soviet-like banking in Afghanistan, which was state-owned banks and all that. So there was not a lot of commercial banking, especially banking for small businesses and then in rural areas. So the opportunity that I saw was rural areas, small business banking in the areas of small businesses, but also in agricultural areas. Okay. So that was the idea behind it. We initially started with 2 of them in 2 different provinces. After their success, then we moved on and worked in 14 provinces. Right. Afghanistan has 34 provinces. So we moved on to 14 provinces and then moved to 15, 16 in a total of 41 community banks. And they were all very, very successful. And it was very important that throughout all those 4 organizations that I've established, to understand that there is a real demand out there. Because sometimes entrepreneurs jump to the opportunity without doing due diligence and their homework. And it's very important to understand that you may have the world's best products and services.
Yes.
If there's no market for it, no one is going to buy them from you.
So why do you think that entrepreneurs are like that, right? Because I often see that, right? They're sort of very convinced that their product has demand, but not necessarily prepared to do the 9 yards, if you like, on the due diligence. How did you establish demand for that first enterprise in Afghanistan? Was it self-evident to you? Did you test the market? How did you see that there was demand? Because I imagine prior to that, under that so-called Soviet era, many people wouldn't have known perhaps what to expect other than what they were getting. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes. So I made use of a lot of data at that point in time. One of the key indicators of the demand there was that the number of people who did not have jobs at that time in rural Afghanistan were really, really high.
Yeah.
The number of agricultural land that was available was the hectares of land that was available was really, really high. It was something that people were not using because they did not have it. Underutilized, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, these were, James, farms that were operational 20 or 30 years before that time.
Yeah.
But because of war, everything was destroyed and no one was using them anymore. But the structure for that agricultural land was there.
Was still there, yeah.
The canals were there. The water was not flowing through, but the canals were there and all that. Yeah. So therefore, it was quite evident in the data that was available and also in the socioeconomic conditions of those people that there was demand for things like that.
Yeah.
But we were also seeing, sadly, in that case, which is not a case that you could have in other countries, is that those people who did not have economic opportunities, they were also going and joining the insurgent lines as fighters. Because if I was a rural man in Afghanistan and I had a family of 4 or 5 people and my land was not doing anything for me, I did not have any other opportunity, and I had the responsibility to feed my family, of course I would say yes to the insurgents and say, yeah, give me $200 and I'll work for you and kill people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there, it was very, very evident that we could take with licit businesses, not illicit, we could get licit businesses out of that insurgency and bring them to do something that was economically viable, economically feasible. And when people are given choice, of course, they choose good versus bad, right?
Yeah.
So it was also about giving them choices as well.
Yeah.
And that's why it became quite successful.
Yeah. And did it happen easily? Did you designed the products for these local banks, and were they purchased, or did you have to market them, or was there a period of uptake? Was there a time when you thought, I don't know whether this is going to work?
Yes. So we were quite lucky there that we never got to doubt what we had started, right?
Yeah.
You touched upon the point of marketing, which is a very, very essential core element of any business. Marketing is important from the perspective that, well, whatever product or service you have, you need to also understand what's the best mechanism for your marketing, right?
Yeah.
So in an advanced society like Australia, your marketing tools may be through social media or through digital means and all that. Yeah. But there are local kind of like connections and word of mouth and gatherings of people and working through the local are very important. Those are your marketing channels. Those are the way that you kind of let people know that something like this exists now, which did not exist previously.
So would you summarize that as the local community, for want of a better word?
Local community, word of mouth, speaking to people of influence. You know how today there's a trend of social media influencers, right?
Yeah.
So this was about 15, 17 years ago for me when we were using local influencers. You see, so for example, if there was a community leader who was an influencer, who was speaking to a large number of people, then we would speak with the community leader who was the influencer for us. And then their job was to go and let other people know about the existence of this new bank or the banking services that we were offering.
I guess I've got a couple of questions around that. I'm an inquisitive dude, right? So, I mean, part of marketing and that demand issue obviously is understanding the purchaser of your product. And you obviously targeted the rural sector. Was that your background? Were you from a rural area within Afghanistan? And does that help sort of, being able to tap into the psyche of the people that are going to buy your product?
I was not from a rural area of Afghanistan. I actually came from Kabul, which is the capital city. But I would say that Kabul, in many senses, was not very different than the rural areas of Afghanistan. So while we did start these banks initially in rural areas of Afghanistan, we also then very quickly moved and started in big cities, including Kabul as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the profile of your customers, when you do marketing, you need to understand the profile of your customers. The profile was not very different in rural areas versus Kabul.
Okay.
Probably the only difference would have been that the focus in rural areas could have been on agricultural businesses.
Because the land was available.
Exactly. Yeah. But in Kabul, it was probably small businesses and value chain of small businesses, right?
Yeah, okay.
It was not production of small products, but it was also the entire value chain. How do you take it to market? Fund a business that would be the transportation business, right?
Yeah.
Or funding a business that would kind of like create a warehouse where other small businesses can bring in, store their goods and products. So it was kind of like a whole value chain for us.
Yeah, very interesting. And the other piece that I wanted to just emphasize, I think it's fascinating you bring up the issue of community, because in a way, I mean, we've gone into a world of social media and different ways of influencers, helping assist product. But in your view, is that community aspect of marketing, is that still important? Is it still important back in your home country? And is it still important here in Australia or not? Do you think it's been disbanded, the whole need for a community focus?
I think it is very, very important, regardless of where you go. Right. The community of your business is very important from different perspectives. If I were to categorize them into two major categories, one of those categories would be that, of course, community is important because other users of your products and services would then give good reviews and speak goodly about them, right? So that's one aspect of it, right? Yeah. But the other aspect of it is also because we are in an era where there is a lot of competition in any sector that you go, right?
Yeah.
And when you are in that type of situation, it is very important that community knows the difference that you bring there, especially if you are giving back to the community.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using some of your profit back in the form of like assisting community projects or being involved in the community from which you actually derive your profits. So that is very important also from that perspective. For example, if I am buying, let's say my grocery from Woolworths or Coles, and I see that one of those companies are involved in my community doing good things, then this actually reiterates the need for me to go and continue my business with them, rather than a business that doesn't do that. So it is very, very important, not only from the perspectives of continued business and word of mouth and also kind of like vouching for you, but it's also important in terms of like sustainability and continuity and longevity of your business.
I think that's very interesting. And you mentioned sustainability, and as a firm that values businesses, we look at valuing the tangible, but also the intangible. And, you know, I can look at a number of businesses that have built very thick communities around what they do. And from my perspective, it's hard to quantify as a financial type person, but there's an inherent intangible value in the thickness of that community support and influence for what those businesses do and who they service. And it's really quite, the ones that do it well, it's a very unique and powerful element of sustaining their business forward, I think. There are plenty of businesses that will say that they're part of the community, but there are not all of those have got the depth of ongoing activity and support of the community, I think. So it's just, I think it's an interesting point of difference.
Yeah, exactly. But it also goes, James, to the idea that, you know, in business we have something called patent and goodwill of your brand, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm Coca-Cola, right? I mean, the very name Coca-Cola is very, very serious asset, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah.
It has gotten to that stage because this company called Coca-Cola has been selling a type of liquid that tastes certain way, right?
Yeah.
And now that particular taste is what actually creates the name Coca-Cola, isn't it?
Yeah.
So similar to this point of like community support is your social kind of like patent, you know?
Yeah.
We've always learned about the idea of like business patent and business kind of like trademark and all that. The social trademark is something that we do not hear people talk about, right? The social license that you have with your buyers or with the wider stakeholder community. So it is that social patent that is a new thing that businesses need to kind of like work towards. And who knows, in future, maybe as the commercial patent is important, the social patent may be very important as well.
Wow, Mihir, I love that. I mean, I haven't heard it put that way before, but I think, you know, thinking about the value of the community as a social patent is a special way of you know, getting people to think about the real value of what they're establishing. Because, you know, if a business can deliver a social patent in terms of their community, they are going to be sustainable. Like, they can't take it for granted, obviously, but like any patent, it's got its life unless it's updated. But I like that analogy. I think it's strong.
Yeah. And I think if we think about it from that social patent perspective, then we may have models to quantify it. You know how you were saying that as a valuation company, you find it difficult to value that social patent.
Yep.
But if we are thinking about commercial patent and all that and trademarks and how much they are worth, there's already a model as to how you put a value, a money value, a dollar value to it.
That's right.
Then the same could be used for a social patent.
Absolutely.
To say, you know what, well, Coca-Cola is worth this much because of the name Coca-Cola, but the social patent of Coca-Cola, right? And that could be potentially, well, how much is Coca-Cola doing in terms of awareness about obesity or the use of sugar or the downside of using sugar and all that, right? And that's what then gives you the value of your social patent.
Of your social patent,
Yes.
Yeah, I love that way of thinking. That's exciting, and I think, you know, that's gonna help some of our listeners think through just what value their business is adding.
Uh-huh.
I want to get on to those other 3 businesses that you've started, but before we do, back in Afghanistan as a young boy growing up, you know, going to school, were you destined to be a business owner or a person that started up businesses? I mean, or was that something that, you know, has just developed over time? I mean, is there something in your background there that meant that you were going to be a serial entrepreneur? Like, you know, how does that happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that that's the thing you want to do?
Yeah. I love the way you characterized it, that naturally for someone like you, James, who do not know me much, you would say back in Afghanistan what it was, right? But the reality was very different for me. I was not in Afghanistan. I was 1 year old when my father was put in prison by the Russians who came to Afghanistan.
Really?
My dad was a military general at the time, just like what's happening today in Ukraine, right? Russia went to Ukraine and kind of like...
It's like history repeating itself.
Exactly. So that was the situation in 1982 when I was born. Russia was in Afghanistan. It was called Soviet Union at the time. My dad was put in prison. And I was 1 year old when my grandfather took me and my sisters and my mom across the border to Pakistan, where I lived the first 19 years of my life as a refugee. Really? Now, to answer the other part of your question, when I was about 9 years old, I had to be the breadwinner for my family, starting a business. Because my father, who returned from prison, did not return to be the same person with his nail taken out, his teeth taken out by that. So he spent like a large number of years in prison because of his role in the military at the time. And that could not be the
breadwinner for the family.
So therefore, at a very, very young age, I was the breadwinner. And I remember starting selling oranges on a small tray. So I started very, very young with that. So during the day, I would be selling oranges and later on other things. And at night, I went to a refugee school. So I did not have a proper classroom. No. I did not sit in a proper kind of like classroom with chairs and tables and colorful books and all that. I sat on the ground under the stars, and that was my schooling, right?
Yeah.
So for the first 19 years of my life, that was my life.
What was the hardest part about that?
I think the hardest part for me as a little boy was seeing the local Pakistani children wearing their very blue uniforms.
Yes,
the way I'm wearing today, right? Yeah. Going to school and having their colorful books, with children's stories and all that, bright colors, green, red, white, and all those, right? But I did not have any of that. So it really, really felt bad that I did not have access to that beautiful building of school, that I couldn't go inside that and see how it is like. And then therefore, from that very time, I have actually developed passion for very bright colors. So if you look at my socks, they would be very colorful. If you look at my watch, my other things, my ties, everything. So I can like try to make up for that lost time. But my books at the time were just two different books. Both of them were black and white. One was just the literacy book. The other was numeracy book. And also they were teaching very bad things. For example, I learned numeracy with the help of like guns and bullets, in the sense that, well, we're saying, okay, 1 bullet, 3 grenades, 4, I don't know, tanks and things like that.
Yeah.
And here in Australia, I mean, in the Western society, we teach our little children things like A for apple, B for banana. For me, it was like W for war or G for jihad and things like that.
So it was all connected to a sad, destructive life.
Exactly. Yeah. But and that wasn't the story of just me. There were millions of Afghan refugees who were settled in Pakistan who were getting that type of education. But luckily, not all of us turned out to be what they wanted us to be, right?
So some were more resilient.
Exactly. Yeah. So in summary, to answer your question, my childhood, I did not go to a normal school, although I did really, really well even in the refugee school. I went on to finish a bachelor degree in accounting and then a master's degree in finance. So I have an MBA in finance. And my last master's was from University of Sydney. In project management, commerce. So I went on and did really well in my education and academic journey. But also in terms of the businesses, I wasn't destined to be a business person. I always wanted to be a pilot or a florist because I love flowers and colors and all that. I'm none of that. There was a time that I wanted to be a university professor. I'm none of that. Instead, I am a boring executive.
Well, perhaps, no, I don't know about that. I mean, I don't want to be too cute, right? But you talked about, and I sort of trying to get the vision of it myself about selling those oranges as a young boy to look after your family. But I wonder, did that give you the sort of sales and business development skills at a very young age? Because you had no doubt to put yourself out there.
It certainly did.
To do
certainly
that, right?
did. Certainly did. Because I think some of the skills that come to me naturally come from that time, right? Because I remember, because it was not a very nice welcome when I would go home if I didn't make lots of sales.
No.
Right? So therefore, then you need to be smart during the day as a young boy. Say, okay, how can you make this possible?
Yeah.
How can you run around and get to places where, how can you actually speak about the product that you have?
Yeah.
How can you actually market your product that you have, right?
Yes.
I mean, there may be other kids also doing the same thing, but why would someone buy it from you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very important that it gives you, and as young children, I mean, people are quite smart, right? It gives you the tools to say, okay, how can I make this happen? How can I finish my tray and go home?
Yeah.
And especially if there's play involved. Unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of time to play.
No,
but every time I wanted to finish this so I could go home and play with my friends. But that didn't happen very, very often.
Yeah. No, fascinating. It's interesting how, our past lives kind of shape some of our attributes moving forward. Tell us about how you came to Australia and how you started the next business.
Yeah. So I came to Australia after my life was not safe anymore in Afghanistan. And when I came to Australia, I was working with the banking sector here because of my previous banking background. And then I moved on and partnered with some of Australia's very big names in the business world, and started and was the founding CEO of an organization called Thrive.
Yes.
What Thrive does is it provides financing to migrants and refugees who have arrived in Australia and they want to start small businesses. So that's the organization that I was the founding CEO of. What we were doing at that time, there are a large number of people who come to Australia as migrants and refugees. We were assisting them to start small businesses. We were providing them the financing, but also prior to providing them the financing, we were working with them to understand whether the business that they're thinking would have legs.
Yeah.
Things like we would assist them with writing a business plan, a marketing plan, putting together the pro forma financials together, right? As to how you'd finances would look like in the next 3 years, right? So all that type of work we would do with them, but also then on the back of that, we would provide them financing.
With financing. So you were assisting them with the early stage feasibility, I guess.
Yes.
Had they started the business at that time, or it was an idea that was...
It was mostly an idea at the concept level. And they would come to us, we'd work with them. There were a large number of those concepts that we would say, I'm sorry, but based on this work that we did with you, not for you, we did with you, there's no demand for this thing. So the example that I gave earlier, that if you're starting a kebab shop on the street, already 4 kebab shops here, right?
Yeah.
Why are you starting the 5th one? It is because the value proposition of this 5th kebab shop would be different, that it would be offering different types of kebab that are not already available in the market, in the street, or it is because there are so many people buying kebab that the existing 4 businesses cannot serve that demand, and therefore you need a 5th one. So very simple things like that.
So the kebab shop is a great analogy for a number. It could be anything, right?
It could be anything, yes.
In helping those prospective business owners figure out whether there was legs in their business, is that what you saw as a major gap? There was a lot of people that were wanting to start the same business because they thought that business would fly, rather than focusing on, well, hold on, how am I going to create something that's going to be valued by the market but going to be different to my competitor? Was that one of the main gaps in business owners at that startup level, or were there others that you saw?
That was a gap then and is a gap now as well.
Yeah.
Right? I have not come across many organizations in Australian business sector that would specialize in assisting startups go through that journey and make sure that the chances of their success are higher.
Yeah.
Right? Because as I said, a large number of business owners or aspiring to be business owners go through that journey and fail it very quickly.
Yeah.
If there is an organization, a company, commercial company with the know-how to actually assist the aspiring business owner to go through that journey of starting up a startup or a business, I think there'd be a lot of value in that.
Yes.
For both the company that's providing that, but also largely for the community.
Yes.
For the growth of the small business sector.
Because it's dealing with those critical success factors in advance of them actually investing the money and seeing them fail as a result.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess there's learning in the failure, but there's also carnage, right? Because
exactly. I mean, learning in the failure, but there are different types of learning, right? I mean, I may be learning by putting my mortgage, my house, my property on the line, and I may be learning by just putting a few $1,000s on the line.
It's a big difference, yeah?
Big difference.
Yeah. It's interesting, you mentioned point of difference with the kebab shop as the example. And as business valuers, our team is constantly looking at a particular business we're valuing and saying, now, hold on, what's its competitive advantage? How is it doing something different to its compatriots in the same market? And for us, that's a really important dynamic to figure out. And it seems that point of difference comes in all sorts of ways. And I don't know whether it's hard for a new business owner or someone in the startup phase to figure out what point of difference is, because it's very easy to look at a kebab shop and look at how it operates. Gee, that's a good kebab shop. I reckon I could run one just like it and it'd be great, But how do you go the next step as a aspiring business owner and say, well, I like that kebab shop, but if I did this, I reckon it'd really go gangbusters. Like it's having, is it creative thought? Is it just presenting something in a different way? I mean, what is point of difference to you? I mean, you've looked at, you've helped hundreds upon thousands probably of business owners get into business. So you will, I guess you will have, you probably have a perspective, Michiel.
Yeah, definitely. I'm of the fundamental belief, James, that not everyone is born entrepreneur. Right? A large number of us may be born aspiring entrepreneurs, but not everyone is born entrepreneur, right? The difference between aspiring entrepreneur and the one actually gets it through the other side is the people who, first of all, can actually have the guts to try it, right? Because there are a large number of us who have these beautiful business ideas, but they always remain just that, ideas.
Yes.
They do not even come out to a second person. It's just in the first person's mind and their thoughts, or sometimes on paper or computer or whatever it is, right? So that's one aspect of it. You need to act on it, right, to see if it fails or succeeds, right? The second thing is that you need to actually be smart enough to not be blown away by, oh, this restaurant has so many customers, right? To actually think behind that kind of like happy, smiling business owner or the happy, smiling, waitress who is giving you your food, to see what goes on in the kitchen. Do you actually understand that? Do you actually have the money to continue this thing for the first 6 months when there are not as many customers as you would have in a successful business, right? So it's that different. That's understanding.
So is that, what breeds that understanding? Is it an element of, in an entrepreneur, self-doubt or self-questioning, or is it simply a brain that's more broadly attuned than specific, or is it ego or lack of ego, or what are the factors that we're trying to analyse the deep inner brains of an entrepreneur here, but
Yes, yeah.
but help us understand that. What are the elements of that?
Yes, I think it is to do with the ability to question your thoughts,
Yeah.
the ability to question your excitement,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The ability to actually say that, okay, on the front end it looks good, but also what is required to get it to that level, right? That analytical capability, right? And I think, as I said earlier, not everyone is born with that analytical capability. And therefore, there needs to be, if we want to promote and grow kind of like startups or small businesses and all that, it is important that there is guidance available.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So let me give you another analogy. I want to, let's say, start driving, and I don't know how to drive, right? The car may be available for me, right? There may be fuel in the tank as well.
Yes. Yes.
There may be a road available as well, right?
Yeah.
But because I don't know how to drive, I may get myself into trouble.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there needs to be an instructor to help me, to guide me, to say, oh, you know what, this is a pedal, this is how you accelerate, this is a steering wheel. If you want to go to certain place, you need to keep your eyes on that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, that there need to be that guidance available.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a large number of aspiring entrepreneurs fail because there's lack of guidance in the market.
And they burn themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they burn themselves financially, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now imagine the startup people are, generally speaking, people who do not have lots of money to kind of like bank on, you know, to gamble.
That's right. So it's a one shot.
It's a one shot thing, right?
Yeah.
And also families, and they're like putting food on the table or at
There's
play
a lot
here.
of collateral damage
to
that decision.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, I want to reflect on what we've talked about, because I see it as two sides of the one coin a little bit. Because you said that the real entrepreneur, from what I understood, was someone that just didn't have an idea, but they had a crack. They said, righto, well, let's try and implement this idea.
Yes.
Right. So they ultimately they need the confidence to say, right, if this is worth a go, I'm going to try and implement it.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of the coin, as we've talked about, is almost an acute, what I term risk management capability. To be able to sit outside yourself and the idea and what you've developed and question, well, hold on, what's going on here? How does that work? How is that going to risk the success of it? So it's quite an interesting dynamic of the entrepreneur, right? Because it's a balanced one. It's almost bumping up against in a positive way if it's working effectively. Because the first side we talked about was proactive, forward thinking, have a crack, let's implement. But the next is, okay, how do we risk manage this to make sure that success is true? I mean, that's an attribute beyond just a startup, though, isn't it? Really, Mahir. I mean, it's a core of being a good business owner, I would have thought. Yeah?
Exactly. The other point that I would like to also highlight here is a large number of small businesses have seen fail because of cash flow problems.
Yes.
Let me explain what I mean, right? The business may be successful and profitable, but they don't get enough cash flow in time to pay for their liabilities and their dues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes inexperienced aspiring entrepreneurs may be making the mistake between something being profitable and having enough cash flow to kind of like get to that, right?
Yeah.
So for example, the kebab shop scenario, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I may do my kind of like due diligence and I may say, you know what, if I sell 120 kebabs during lunchtime in this kind of like locality, because there are lots of businesses coming to me, right? And I hire 2 people and I work myself and this is the rent and blah, 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 right? Then I may be able to actually make it, and that this will be a positive kind of like thing. There'll be a positive surplus here, right?
Yeah.
However, I may, if I fail to understand that, well, okay, to get to that, you need to also have money to kind of like put into the ingredient to buy those things and pay the rent on time and pay the utilities and things like that and pay those people who are working for you on time and all that for long enough, then that's the point of difference here, right? So cash flow and inavailability of liquid cash in the time that you need it is one major reason I've seen businesses fail. If they could hold on to that business for much longer, a bit of longer, then they would have been successful.
Yeah.
But the fact that they can't actually pay the rent or pay the dues in time, and they don't have that much cash,
is a major factor in sending them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Isn't it interesting? Because I feel in small business, but also in medium and reasonably large business, there's a mantra often spoken about around the barbecue or around the gathering of business owners that, oh, business is good, I'm growing fast, my turnover is X. It's gone from, X to double X. And, I've got a nice juicy profit. But very rarely is there a discussion about my net cash position was Y. Like it's just not, the ego of talking business is growth and top line growth usually. And really, sure, a growing business is a positive thing because I guess in isolation it means that your products, got demand in the market. However, at what expense? Unfortunately, I've seen some quite large private businesses, be thrown on the scrap heap because of the growth curve, and are focused by the people running the business just on the growth curve without thinking about the very factor you're talking about, and that is, how do you fund the growth? And is that funding sustainable? And I think that's the good ones, the good business owners, they've worked out that tension, and they grow, but they grow it on a sustainable basis.
Exactly. Yeah. And when I speak about cash flow, also I think it is a bit more just at one point cash flow, right? When we're talking about cash flow, a business needs to think about, well, okay, for example, in the next 1 year or in the next 2 years, what are my cash flow demands? Sometimes we make the mistake that, okay, today my cash flow is good. I'm not aware of my cash flow needs tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for example, today I'm selling 120 kebabs and my business is going well, right? But there's a regulatory requirement that I need to kind of like change my machine to kind of like make it more electricity efficient. I'm just making an example, right?
Yeah.
Now, do I have the money for that? Do I have the cash flow for that? Right? So cash flow is not a one-time thing. It is a continuous thing, right? So for example, in the banking world,
yes,
you may have cash flow today, but do you have enough capital tomorrow for the next phase? Do you have next? Of course, there's always hope.
But thinking about the community banking business in Afghanistan and also Thrive, as an owner and an entrepreneur who started both those businesses, at the time, how far forward were you looking? Or was it that rough and tumble that the best you could do was look at your feet? What was it like in that early stage? And I'm interested to understand what that was like.
In all of the businesses that I have started or been the founding CEO of, was involved with, I was always thinking about 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
While focused on the 3 years term, the main kind of like thing that I always had was 1 year. I always wanted to make sure that I have enough for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
That would actually then give me the comfort that, okay, I don't need to run around like mad person looking for cash flow and all that, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to secure that. And also, unless you secure, you go. And once you secure, then of course you need to always maintain that level.
Yes. But there's plenty of businesses in the world today that would think 12 days, not 12 months. And so you're saying, look, at a minimum, I wanted to be funded for 12 months.
Yes, yeah. I also know businesses that focus on 6 months, right? They're saying, okay, for 6 months I'm good, I have enough cash flow and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it works. Of course, it's different in each industry, right? But one need to really be forward thinking and not think about today and also being able to, okay, I can pay my staff for the next month and that's fine.
But what I like about it is the minute you take yourself out 12 months, and look, you can make all the arguments to say, well, but how do I know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 12 months? You know, what externalities might impact the business. But the minute you take yourself out there and look at how do you fund the business for that period, given what you see, then you're suddenly looking at the business from a very different angle, aren't you? It's almost back to the entrepreneur aspect of being able to question yourself and say, well, you know, can the business sustain this? If these things happen, if I have to invest in that new machine, what does that mean? Does it mean there'll be some downtime in the month that I invested? How will that impact cash flow? So it really puts you on a different level, I think, as someone running the business, to be able to position yourself in a forward position.
Exactly.
And,
yes.
Yeah, I think it's an important one.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is always a role for not taking it easy.
Yeah.
You know, to say, you know what, now it's profitable. It's been running for 20 years. Everything is good. I have like a healthy profit coming and blah, blah, blah. Now I can relax, right? You can't get to a place of kind of like saying, okay, you've done and now there's no worry for the future.
Now, just on that, as a serial entrepreneur, do you ever see yourself being in a business for 5, 10, 20 years? Or is part of what is your passion the startup phase and getting the business to a sustainable level and then exiting or passing it on to others? I mean, do you have a perspective on that for you and what drives that?
Mm-hmm. For me, I think I'm 41 years old now, and I've had a few cracks at it previously. As I jokingly said earlier, every time I rolled dice, it was quite successful previously. Yeah. There's always fear that the next one may not be as successful, right? But I think also personally for me, I think I've had enough of of starting from scratch, because there's a lot of gut that takes to kind of like start the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Especially if that is the source of revenue for you and for your family. That's the only source of revenue. So there's always kind of like a lot of thinking involved before you kind of like say yes to the next thing and do your due diligence. I mean, if you were to ask me, there are probably 3-4 ideas of businesses always in my mind any single time, right? That I could do these. But I think it takes a lot of like courage to do the next thing. So if I had it my way, I would actually kind of like retire from being a serial entrepreneur and be in a stable kind of like environment, in a stable job and all that, and bring in my entrepreneurial skills. Because even in a stable business, you could use your entrepreneurial skills to start new things within that stable and existing business, right?
Yeah.
So that's what kind of like I want to do. But you never know. I mean, we have a saying in Afghanistan that the canals that once had flowing water, if they're dry today, there may be another stream coming again in future, right? So you can't trust it.
But that's part of. I mean, that's. I think, it's also part of an entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. Like I spoke to one of my clients this morning who's a serial entrepreneur and a very successful one in Australia, and he's in his mid to late 70s. And he's ringing me about another investment, another project, that's got got IP developed, and they're through the commercialization process, and you know, and here he is, you know, almost 80 years of age, and then there's another stream coming.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And look, he's had some failures, but he's had some screaming successes.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's interesting if I reflect on that fellow and your comments today. Yes, he's got those elements of ideas into action, but you know, how will it work? What are the factors that might trip it up? So he's got those elements, and maybe as a business owner that you talked about in the next phase, if it's not startup, but it's you know, running a business, say longer term, not in a steady state way, but in the next sort of evolution of the business, because of your experience in starting up those 4 businesses, perhaps you're a better business owner as a result. Do you think? I mean, are there elements that you know that you've gained from that experience that you feel you know would do well in a business over a long period? As someone running and changing it?
Definitely yes, because I mean it's just natural that if you walked on a road, then it is known to you, right?
Yeah.
You know where the bumps are and the humps are and all those things, right? So it's natural that you would kind of like be more aware compared to someone who's walking that road the first time. Yeah. And also, as you go through that, you learn as a business owner as to where you can go and get the ingredients you need for your business. For example, in startup world, it's important that you use the least money to get the most out of that, right? Yeah. So, for example, making use of platforms like Fiverr, spelled as Fiverr. Where you have talent from around the world, especially in countries where Australian dollar may be very high there. Here, something that you buy for $10 may be something that would cost $1, in terms of like services, by the way. To make use of things like that, or kind of like to know, well, where can I go to do this thing? Where can I go to do this thing? Or for that matter, if you are in need for a physical space, right? So where can I go to actually the first 12 months of my startup? Well, sometimes government kind of like funded spaces where you could go and work from that, or you could go and work from a co-working space and things like that. Like you don't have to have your own things to begin with, right?
No.
You can share.
So you're talking about being resourceful.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Resourceful and using the model of shared economy, right? And also partnerships are very important in businesses, right? If you look at the very successful tech companies, you would always have a founder and a co-founder. So very rarely you see a founder, right?
Yeah.
Very rarely, but there's always like a founder and co-founder. There's a reason why that is the case. More resources, more brain power.
So in the businesses that you've started up, have you typically had a co-founder?
As I said, of the 4 businesses that I have either founded or were the founding CEO, the founding CEO ones were kind of like where I had partners, right?
Yes.
Where kind of like it was working with other people and bringing their idea to life.
Yes.
But in the other organizations, it was purely myself.
Yes.
Again, even while it was purely myself, there were other people who were kind of like on the same kind of like bandwidth with me, wanting to do the same thing. So bringing them along was a key part of it.
Now, I want to explore this a little bit here, because I'm dealing with a business at the moment. They're 3 years old, still startup phase, but they're now profitable and they've got their business model pretty much in place, but they've been investing. 2 partners, both working in the business, so founder and co-founder. And they've just got to the stage where, on paper, I look at the business and say, well, it's going to really start delivering from here on in, right? and there's that sort of hockey stick phase where they've had to spend a lot of money to get it to where it needs to be, but they've tested the proposition and there are signs in the markets that they service that the demand's strong and it's starting to flow through. And the co-founder and partner and founder have just got to the stage where they've worked out that they don't like working with each other, and one wants to buy the other out, right? So they've come to lock heads, which it seems sad, right? Because everything else is kind of coming along. They've done some of the hard yards. So, in your experience, to think about the positive, right? Because I think partnerships are very important in business. What are the ingredients to make that partnership work well, do you? Where there are two partners in a business, particularly in the early years?
Thinking along the same lines is one key ingredient, right? You need to be on the same bandwidth, right? If you are on FM 95 and I'm on FM 97, we may not be listening to each other, right?
Yeah.
The songs that you listen to may be very different than the one that I listen to. It's very important to be on the same bandwidth, right? On the same thinking style. It's also important that commercially and financially, that you're either both around the same kind of like strength.
Yes.
Or if one is more powerful and the other one is less powerful, then there is kind of like strong understanding and commitment that, okay, this is something and how that will work. That's the other thing. One key ingredient that I can't emphasize enough on is, and I've seen these situations before as well, is it's usually a good idea to be at odd numbers rather than even numbers.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
If not possible to be at odd numbers like 3, 5, 4, whatever, it is important to have a mutual third person in there, right? Because it's natural that two people, even like in life, like husband and wife, or husband and wife and wife, right? I must say those things because,
especially World Pride Day.
Exactly. If you come from Afghanistan, it's very easy for people to put a label on you.
Yeah.
So I need to be doing a bit more to say, well, no, don't put that label on me. So even if you're in a partnership of life, there are sometimes things like this. So it's important to have a third person who you both respect, who you both value, to go to that person, because that person can potentially then work with you and put you kind of like, if someone is kind of like beyond the line, to put them back and bring them back. That's a very, very important element. Whether that third person is a friend, a mutual friend, whether that is a paid advisor or a board member or someone, it's very, very important to have that third person. Otherwise, you are bound to have disagreements, and at times those disagreements get to a stage where you can't work together.
Yeah.
And then it comes at the cost of the company's failure,
Which is very sad, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Mihir, it's been wonderful talking to you today. I feel, we've travelled far in the space of, sort of 60 minutes here. And I really appreciate you sharing, some of your background and your journey. If you're thinking about our listeners who are business owners in all walks of life, perhaps to end on, I'm wondering, in terms of building a sustainable business, is there anything further that you'd like to add from what we've talked about?
I think for business owners, I'd like to say that it's important to kind of like be proud of your success, but never kind of like think that, well, you're too successful, too good to fail, So kind of like always staying on your toes to say, well, okay, I shouldn't become less kind of like alert. That's very, very important. But also, I think the other thing that is important is kind of like throughout every year, have some time to refresh yourself, to charge your batteries, and leave it. Sometimes it's okay to leave your business to someone else that you trust, and then take a holiday or kind of like go do something that you like and come back. Because sometimes as humans, and I've seen it with myself as well, that you burn out and you're not aware of it, and then it actually shows in your business decisions.
Yeah.
We may be making really decisions that are not helpful to your business. So it's very important that we actually recharge our batteries as business owners, and also go in and put some time into learning new things. I always loved the idea that I could kind of like take some time off, a day or two every quarter or a month, and go and learn a new thing, right? Because that way, then you are actually not keeping your information and talent at the level that you started. You're gradually building, right? You're recharging your batteries, you're freshening up yourself, but you're also equipping yourself with new tools to make sure that your business continuation and success is sustainable.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the way I summarise that is don't be complacent about your business. Yeah. Keep your mind and body fresh, so you're making good decisions. Be fit, if you like, in yourself, and you'll make good decisions. And continuously want to learn and grow. Yeah. And I think, Mihir, that's some wonderful advice for our listeners. And I'd like to thank you very much for being part of Let's Talk Business today.
I love speaking with you. Thanks for having me, James.
Thank you. That was Mihir Mamand. And wow, to see Mihir's journey and understand how he's developed the skills to be a serial entrepreneur and to run and manage successful businesses, I think is a delight, and some great learnings for us as business owners in terms of what we do in all walks of life. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram at JamesC_Price. And if you're up for improving your business, gaining access to knowledge, insights, our team, and consultations, join our online membership portal. Visit jpabusiness.com.au.